What's up, internet? Today I want to talk about some of Trump's cabinet picks and how they could affect us. Particularly, I want to talk about the Department of Education and how no matter who he picks or who gets appointed, it seems like they're most likely going to shut down the Department of Education. I mean, I know conservatives have been LARPing about this forever, but it seems like they finally have the means to carry this out. So we're probably going to have to deal with the reality where the Department of Education gets pretty much dismantled for all intents and purposes. So, I mean, what was the Department of Education in charge of, right? So they're in charge of gathering statistics at a national level for education, which is pretty important. And it seems like it's nice to have a national body to collect statistics for us to make judgments off of when it comes to education. What else are they in charge of? They're in charge of, I want to say this might be one of their original intents and purposes back in the 1980s, if I remember correctly, when it was founded by, I want to say, Jimmy Carter. Is to just make sure that schools are equally paying out funds, so you don't have something like, you know, a well-funded white school next to a poorly funded black school, because most of the funds are getting funneled into the white school. But so far, and even in Trump's agenda, what is it, Agenda 47? He has like condensed version of all his measures he wants to put out, which is, you know, a decent way of doing it, but that's another topic for another day. I watched it to brush up on everything, and yeah, he says he wants to dismantle the Department of Education. He wants to send it back to the states. Conservatives are using this line a lot lately. If I had to guess, it seems like they're not even too sold on being united. They just want 50 different countries with no federal government involvement at all. So, you know, take that how you will. But when talking about the Department of Education specifically, these are the people that also dole out things like Pell Grants and financial aid for college students, so that'll dry up. I haven't heard a Republican plan to replace these things. I know when I'm 34, when I went to college when I was like 20, you know, I spent 3 semesters in college, messed around, you know, dropped out and went about my business doing other things, finally getting into the trades. But at the end of it, I only had like a $10,000 bill for student loans, which seems like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it was easy enough to pay off. It didn't sink me. It didn't ruin me financially. And a lot of that was due to like Pell Grants and stuff that, you know, would have been directly attributed to the Department of Education. And, you know, without that, I could see college becoming more expensive because there'll be less federal financial aid. And we'll just kind of be in a worse place than we already are in terms of affordability for college. So we'll see how that goes. What other wide-reaching effects this has is that mostly, I was looking at, there's a map online, and I'd ask you to go look at it. You can look at the federal funding for schools through each state, and it's mostly red states where like 10% of their budget is federal funding. If you look at most of the major blue states, it's anywhere from like 5 to 8%. But these are going to affect those areas, you know, rather hard. You're about like in Florida, 10% of their federal budget for education. I mean, 10% of their budget for education comes from the feds. That's going to up and vanish. That doesn't exist anymore if he dismantles the Department of Education. So, you know, there'll be wide-reaching consequences for this. Yeah, and the states are going to have to handle it at a state level where the conservatives want it. Funny enough, though, if you look up like how many employees each of these agencies have of the cabinet members, what is it, 15 cabinet members, I think, in conjunction with these agencies, the Department of Education only has 42 to 4,400 employees. It has the lowest amount of employees out of all the agencies. I want to say the next closest one was 9,000 employees for like the urban development department. So that's just funny that the least amount of the agency with the least amount of agencies is the one, I mean, with the least amount of employees is the one they want to dismantle for efficiency reasons. I'm not really sold on that. I think there's other reasons, because if you control it more at the state level, then, you know, more extreme things can be taught. But you know what, funny enough, most of these curriculums are controlled at the state level. Obviously, when you take federal money, there's going to be some strings attached, right? So, like, the simple answer is, you know, just don't take the federal money, and you could teach whatever you want. So all this fear-mongering over the Department of Education is kind of silly, honestly, when all of this could be handled at a local level already. Like, you can already turn down the federal funding for your school and do whatever you want. You don't need to take part in any of the stipulations from the feds if you're not taking any of the federal funding, right? Like, let your state fund it if that's what you want to do, but I don't see that as a good reason to cut the other 49 states off from federal funding for education. I think a lot of people see how much money gets spent on education. I want to say it's the fourth largest budget out of all the departments, like fourth or fifth, something like that, out of 15, with the least amount of employees. You know, figure me that. And you got to people need to take into account, like, yeah, you're spending all this money, but what are you doing with that money, right? Like, how are we multiplying this money by spending it on whatever we're spending it on? And through education, I mean, I think it's a valiant effort to educate children, and, you know, in later years, there'll be a more educated workforce, and I would say that's money well spent if we're talking about investments. You know what I mean? If you're going to invest in anything, I feel like education's the one thing that, like, we can get direct impacts from rather quickly, right? I'm not saying every kid 20 years from now is going to be illiterate because we dismantled the Department of Education, but, you know, it might be harder for one of our kids to go to college, especially if we couldn't afford to save up for college his whole life or their whole life. And, you know, now there's not a agency in charge of financial aid for them to even try and take a loan to go to college if they want to. So in conclusion, you know, I think this is a horrible idea. I don't think we should be working towards dismantling the Department of Education. I think we should want to fund our children's future through education, and even at, like, a federal level, it gives us the ability to see where, if, like, something really bad's happening in one state, it gives us a body, an agency to try and directly affect whatever's happening in that region, instead of just relying on the state solely. Because obviously, if there's a problem in a state, then the state government isn't taking care of it. So you would hope there would be another body to help with that, which would be the feds. So I guess in the long run, we just kind of got to think about what we want out of American institutions. And I wish people would look more into what these institutions actually do. You know, why they're there. What's that? And it just, you know, realize that just because you're funding a program doesn't make it a waste of money. That sometimes those programs can multiply in positive externalities down the road. And whether the Department of Education is a negative or positive externality, I'm not 100%, but, you know, I'd put the $5 in my pocket on positive. I don't see how, like, growing a more, like, homeschool base or, you know, decentralizing schools to a ridiculous amount is really helping anyone. So we'll see, and, you know, they'll definitely do it because they have the power to this time. So thanks for listening. That's just my daily thoughts on the craziness going on in America right now. I hope you enjoyed. You know, like, comment, subscribe. Love you. Have a good day.